Hey, welcome to Gold Creek Online. We're so glad you're here. Hey, Pastor James and I are just so excited to be here with you today. James, what we got going on?
We just want you to know that we're committed to doing our best to make this as good of an experience for you as possible. We're constantly going to be tweaking week to week. It may look different, but we're doing this for you guys because we want to give you a online presence that you go, okay, cool. I know that this will be here. It's consistent, and God will speak to me through this. So we're thankful that you're joining us, and let's see what's on the docket today.
Hey, Gold Creek, thank you so much for investing in our church and doing what Scripture tells us in 1 Timothy, to give to help those who are in need. And something that we get to do and we celebrate in that is that we got to launch youth ministry here in Lake Stevens. We have anywhere from 15 to 20 students that come on a regular basis to our Wednesday nights here in the Creator Zone at Lake Stevens. And really our money is going toward that next generation when we give here at our church. Hey, there's so much more work to do here even in our youth ministry. We want to see it grow and become bigger and bigger. And there are a lot of tasks that have to go into that, and we want to challenge you into partnering with us. If you've never thought about giving before, or you want to take that next step in your life, text this number here and just join in with us today to band together with your brothers and sisters in Christ to give to the Lord, to see what He can do. And so if this is somewhere you call your home, we would love to have you partner with us so that we can make a greater impact on our community here.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
Who let the dogs out? A little bit of Monica in my life, a little bit of Erica by my side.
Hey, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you guys are here with us today. Pastor James here from your favorite campus and mine, Lake Stevens. We're in the middle of One Hit Wonders. This is one of my favorite series, just because I'm a trivia buff, music buff. So for me, this was just fun. But I'm glad you guys are here. But let's just jump in. So who remembers this song coming up? You ready? You ready for this song? I'm gonna cue it up and go.
What you want, what you want, what you gonna do?
When Chevy Sean Brown come for you.
Right? Bad Boys. Who could forget that song? Now, I'm going to ask you, I know you're at home or you're at work or you're wherever you are and you're watching this on a separate occasion, but you don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to. You can raise your hand if you want to, but let me ask you. When you heard that song, did you think of the show Cops from the mid-90s to the late 90s? Did you think of that show? Bad Boys, what you got? That one? Or did you think of the Will Smith, Martin Lawrence Bad Boys franchise movie? I'm curious. I think of the Cop show, but when we were talking about it in sermon planning, two of the guys in the room were like, oh, I thought of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, which is kind of interesting that you have the same song but different associations. I remember one time I was involved in a high-speed chase. When I think of the show Cops and I think of those kinds of things, I was involved in a high-speed car chase. You may not know that about me, but I'm confessing it now to you. It's out there. I was never caught. Now, you see in college, there is what's called public safety. So they're not really the police necessarily. They're just kind of a private institution that tries to do what it tries to do. And they had all these golf carts everywhere, and they would use these golf carts to patrol, to write tickets, to do all those things. And I figured out, and I don't even remember how I got to this point, but I figured out that my mailbox key for all the mail that I had in the dorms and all that fun stuff, that mailbox key could unlock and turn on all the golf carts that they owned. So once I figured that out, and I told my roommates, I'm like, hey, we should take the golf carts out tonight. Like after it's late, it's like 1 a.m, let's go grab the golf cart. So we did, and we took one, and we just going for a ride. And a few minutes in, we noticed there was another golf cart. The other public safety patrol, I guess they saw us take the golf cart or whatever it was. They start chasing us, and they're coming after us. And so I'm like, oh, here we go. It's time. And I floor it. And we did 0 to 60 in like 3.5 weeks. They're golf carts. They weren't very fast. And we took off, all 15 miles an hour of us, just hair blowing in the wind, just going. Now, the other thing that I was really good at, because this wasn't my first time taking their golf carts, was I figured out how to drift these things, like Tokyo Drift, Fast and the Furious style. I figured it out by tapping the brakes a certain way, turning the wheel a certain way, and then gunning it through that turn. I could drift around turns. So as hard as they tried, they could not catch me. Could not. There was nothing they could do. On the straightaways, we're the exact same speed, and on the turns, I would just gather so much more momentum, and I would whip around the turns. And by the time they hit the turn, I'm already on my way back. So they could not catch me. And they ended up, I don't want to say giving up more than they just got left in the dust, but we escaped. And I drove the golf carts back, plugged everything in the way they had them, locked everything back up, and no one was necessarily the wiser until this moment. Now, hopefully the statute of limitations has run out on taking golf carts for a joyride on private institution campuses, but Bad Boys was not picked as a random song. Yes, it's a one-hit wonder, but it also happens to be one of the themes of the book of Obadiah, which is where we are going to be today. Now, before we do, I want to quickly introduce and set the stage for what's happening in Obadiah. This is the shortest book in the Old Testament, definitely the shortest of the minor prophets. It's only 21 total verses, and it's the toughest to date because of the lack of information with the length of the book. There aren't a whole lot of verses of, well, and this happened in King Darius's time, and then this happened with Babylon, and this happened with such and such king, or this such and such prophet. So there wasn't a ton. But most scholars put this particular book, Obadiah, either at 840 BC or 550 BC. Based on the attacks described in verses 10 through 14. And most scholars, now I'm not saying all, most scholars agree that it's probably the 550, the closer to the Jesus one, 500 years till Jesus. But whatever the case, Jerusalem, whichever Obadiah it was, Jerusalem has been attacked. Edom, their relatives, which, if you didn't know who that was, Edom are the descendants of Esau, and Israel are the descendants of Jacob. So they're related, they're family, they're cousins. But Edom joined in the Babylonian attack, and they would loot and they would turn in their relatives. If the Israelites tried to flee, they would stop them, catch them, bind them, and turn them into the Babylonians. So the people now of Israel are hurt, feelings physically and emotionally, and also they were hurt because they were being persecuted and attacked. They were scared. And they didn't know what their future was going to hold for them. They were like, well, God, where are you? What's next? So we're gonna dive into this and really kind of dissect what Obadiah says to, one, the Edomites and also the bad boys, and also his own people, the Israelites. So let's jump right in. And it says, this is a vision that the sovereign Lord revealed to Obadiah concerning the land of Edom. Okay, this is the vision of Obadiah. He's rebuking the Edomites. And he's being very clear with that. And he's being very obvious with that, because that's the opening lines of verses 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And it just keeps going on. So he's encouraging the Israelites in a second. He spends more time actually rebuking than encouraging, but he's going to say that God's going to restore you. But before we do that, he's going to be like, you know what? These guys have wronged us. They have wronged you. They've wronged me. They've wronged God. And God's going to have his justice. And I think all of us right now, if you're sitting there, you can relate to the contextual way of thinking. Like, you and I might not be in captivity, but we all know the pain of what it feels like to lose hope. Will I make it? Will we make it? Will they make it? We understand that pain of not knowing what's next. And usually, when tough times arise and that hope is dwindling, there are ways that we respond. And some of the ways that we respond is we retreat when we should fight. So those are things like avoidance, dismissive comments, procrastination, and plain old running away. We can also surrender when we should hold. That's where we give in, we relent, or we use the word compromise. Even though we're probably not compromising more than we're just giving in, we're just using that word to save face. And then the last thing we typically do is we fight the wrong battles. This is where we self-depreciate. Oh, it was my fault. I did this. I brought this upon myself, when maybe we didn't. Or we pick unnecessary fights where it's not about the actual issue. We're picking a fight because we don't want to deal with the actual issue. We lash out, we deflect. Now, avoiding, running from, or ignoring your problems create a temporary relief. Let's just be real. When there's a problem and we don't deal with it, temporarily we feel better because we're not in the middle of it. But in the back of our minds, we're thinking, oh, I still got to deal with this. I still got to talk to such and such. I still got to fix this problem. And what happens is when we avoid, we run from, we ignore problems, that creates more anxiety because they're already anxious with the fact that this problem exists. But now that we're putting it off, we're having to come back to it, and it creates an extra level of anxiety that's unnecessary. It creates depression. Oh, I've got this problem. I don't want to deal with it. It creates that depressive feeling inside of you, like, oh, woe is me kind of thing. It creates negative thoughts. Oh, can't believe this has happened to me. And then you start following rabbit trails, right? Creating victims, villains, stories, like all this stuff. And of course, physically, it decreases your energy because you're being drained, because you're having to put thought and emotions into something that you know is going to be tough. So we know we shouldn't run from our problems. We know this. But what can we do about that? So today I'm going to talk about 3 things that we can do to restore hope. The first thing I want to talk about is focusing on what you can control, which is yourself. If we keep reading in Obadiah, this is verses 11 through 12. It says the first 10 verses is him just saying, you guys are terrible people. But here's some of the paraphrasing, or he comes back around to it. And it says this, when they were invaded, you stood aloof, refusing to help. He's talking to the Edomites. Foreign invaders carried off their wealth and cast lots to divide up Jerusalem, but you acted like one of Israel's enemies. You should not have gloated when they exiled your relatives to distant lands. You should not have rejoiced when the people of Judah suffered such misfortunes. Yeah, they helped destroy Israel? Of course I'm going to be mad. The Edomites weren't strong enough to fight Israel head on. They tried a few times, they lost badly, many, many times. So they knew they couldn't defeat them. They didn't have the manpower. They didn't have anything. So they waited until another more powerful enemy attacked Israel, and then they joined in. They piled on, and they gloated over it, even rejoicing. It's tough to see other people celebrate when you're down, isn't it? I mean, it's so easy to lash out and to retaliate when you've been wronged. years ago, and you may remember this. You at least know the history of it. In 1992, the city of Los Angeles experienced what was called the LA riots, and it was all brought upon. There's a police brutality that happened with Rodney King, and it was all recorded, and then the police were acquitted, and as a result, civil unrest just blew up in all over LA, from Koreatown through Inglewood, just crazy parts. And there was a lot of rioting and anger, and just hurt and looting, and just some crazy stuff that was happening. And if you didn't know that, Google it, and you'll see a lot of images from that part of our history. But I, in 1992, did live in California, and I remember watching some of this stuff unfold in absolute disbelief. But as I was thinking about that, I was reading about a woman named Paulette Washington. And Paulette lived in LA during those times. She lived in the old neighborhoods where all of the rioting was happening, and she lived in Inglewood. So she is very familiar. All her friends were from that area. And she watched as the tension started rising. She started watching all of her friends gathering together and starting and joining these riots. And here she is, angry as well too. She was mad. She wanted to be a part of this. She's like, oh, I want to be here. I want to show them that I'm angry too. Where's the justice for my community? Where's the justice for what just happened? But in her heart, she knew that she couldn't do this, that she shouldn't do this. And she said she didn't know why, but she just didn't feel like this is going to help. This is not going to be something that's going to be helpful to her community. So she didn't join in. She walked away. And later throughout the night, all her friends that were in that group that participated in this riot, they were all arrested that evening. But it didn't end with that as her story. It wasn't just a story of her walking away. See, this moment was a catalyst for her. It was a catalyst for her heart and for what she does now. Because today, she works with the Affiliates and Offenders Recovery Program in LA. What that means is her life is devoted to helping people to stop the patterns of behavior that has led them to incarceration and that road that leads to destruction. She took that experience when everyone else around her, all her friends, were doing these things. She says, this is not the way. And she changed her pattern of behavior. See, spiritual maturity says, I'm not going to worry about what other people are doing. I'm going to focus on what I'm doing. And you've probably heard me say this a bazillion times. The only person that you can control is yourself. You can't make others do what you want consistently. You can be an influence for sure. But in the end, they control themselves and you control yourself. So whenever things that happen to us seem tough and we want to fight or run away, we have the choice to stick around and really work through it or to run away. We have the choice to control our own behavior and how we react. The second step that we can take is we don't allow real hurt to change your view of God. Let me read to you some scriptures again. And this is out of Obadiah, verse 18, I believe. Yes, 18. The people of Israel will be a raging fire, and Edom a field of dry stubble. The descendants of Joseph will be a flame roaring through the field, devouring everything. There will be no saviors in Edom. The Lord, have spoken. This is supposed to be encouragement. God is reminding them so many times, and he's reminded them in the past, he's reminding them right now, that they are his chosen people. From Abraham, through Moses, through Joseph, through Jacob, he told them over and over again, you are my chosen people. I have created a connection with you that will not be severed. Now that should be their perspective. But in this moment, I don't know that it is. They're discouraged. And you and I know that hurt changes us. When we're hurt, things inside of us shift. And when I use the word real hurt, because the hurt that you're experiencing is real. It absolutely. But it doesn't have to change your view of God. It doesn't have to affect necessarily how you process who God is in your life. And I'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to share a friend of mine's story. A friend of mine was a pastor of a smaller church, probably about 100 people, maybe ish, a little bit less. And he was brought in, he's a young pastor, he's brought in to kind of help revitalize that church and help them reach into the community and attract young families. He was well liked. He was a really good communicator, did an excellent job crafting messages and making them engaging. He taught from the Bible, so it wasn't like it was just some random stuff that he said. Like, he was a Christ-following church leader, and he led his church well. He's doing a great job. Well, during one of his board meetings, he got into an argument with another board member. Nothing super heated. They just had a disagreement on how the budget should be split. And this disagreement was intense enough that it was an argument, for lack of a better term. But towards the end of it, my friend thought that they came to a good resolution. He's like, I feel like we came to a good understanding, and you and I are both set our piece, and we're going to kind of let it sit, and at the next meeting we'll address that again and see if anything's changed. So they ended the meeting, and everything went where it went. They had a great Sunday that following Sunday. I don't know what day the board meeting was, but that following Sunday they had a great Sunday. They had some new faces. It was fun, an exciting moment in the church. Momentum was starting to begin. But then 7 days later, my friend was fired. Just let go. He did nothing wrong. He had no moral failures. He was scripturally sound. But the board member that he had gotten into an argument with influenced the other board members and started spreading lies and talking about how terrible of a person he is, and got him fired. He personally did not like that someone disagreed with what he thought was the right thing to do. And rather than work it out, he had enough influence within that church to push out my friend, and he lost his job just like that. And even as he left, the board member threw one more last jab, and he says, "You should have just let it go. He basically said, you should have let me have my way." And now my friend is wondering, did I mistake my calling? Should I not have gone into the ministry? Like, God, are you sure? Maybe I was supposed to be something else. I have a different degree. Are you sure this is the direction? Is this where you want me to be? It is so easy to forget that God is still with us when hope is fading. It's so easy. I understand that. When we should be saying, God loves me. Jesus died for me. I am an adopted child of God. My place at the table of God is set for me. When we should be saying those things, instead we question where God is. There's a great book, and it'll be on our resource page, which means you can go to our website, or if you have the app, you click the resources. And the book is called Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table. And it's written by Louis Giglio. Great book. I've read it once, and I've heard him preach about it, and he has a whole message built around that. And it's just an amazing perspective from a pastor who's been a pastor for a long time, talking about how in our personal lives, we create these intimate moments, and we'll call them the table, right? And usually when you're having dinner with someone or lunch with someone or whatever it is, it's a little more intimate than just having a face-to-face meeting or a board meeting or a video meeting or whatever it is. There's some intimacy that's created because you're creating community. I think we all understand that. That's not the concept that we're talking about here. But within there, within your community group, within your table of your heart, your mind, your soul, those things, there are people that are going to want a seat at your table that do not belong there. And what that does is it creates the dynamic of dissension, and it creates issues of division, and it just does all of these things. You question everything because when you want to be having community, they are being destructive. And Louis Giglio walks through that. And he helps us kind of process through how do we recognize those kinds of people. And that's a sermon and a topic for another day. But if you would like to know more, I would highly encourage you to buy his book or download the Audible or whatever it is that you need to do. But I was thinking about that book as I was thinking about my friend, because he thought the board member was on his side. He thought his table with these board members was set. Pastorally, or the purpose of an elder board, typically biblically, is to lift up and support the pastor. That's why they're there. What he didn't know is he really had an enemy at his table. He didn't know that. until it was too late. My friend could have left that experience and had his heart destroyed. He could have walked away saying, God, I'm done with you. I gave you a shot. You let me down. I'm not doing this. I've seen it happen before. I've seen lots of pastors that have walked away from the faith. It's not a new thing. And it's usually because of some sort of church hurt. But he didn't. He didn't do that. He just kept saying, well, God has other plans for me. And obviously it's not at that church. I don't know what it is yet, but I know he has been faithful to me my entire life. I'm still going to trust him right now. That's a hard place to be in, but it's a game changer of a place to be in. The last step I want to talk about is remember that God has a purpose and a plan for you. Now, I know it sounds very pastoral. Bear with me. Let's read the scriptures. It says, the exiles of Israel will return to their land and occupy the Phoenician coast as far north as Zarephath. The captives from Jerusalem, exiled in the north, will return home and resettle the towns of Negev. Those who have been rescued will go up to Mount Zion in Jerusalem to rule over the mountains of Edom, and the Lord himself will be king. Remember, God has a purpose and a plan for you. Don't worry about those that ignore your needs, or those that rejoice at your problems, or those that take advantage of your crisis, or those that join others in attacking you. God has a plan and a purpose for you. What's really cool about the story with my friend is that he ended up taking a youth pastor job. He was a senior pastor, got fired. His heart was in the right place. He says, God is faithful. He'll put me in the right spot. And another small church in the next city over reached out and said, would you like to come and be our youth pastor? We have this opening. We know you. We love you. We think you're a great guy. Come take this job. And for many in the pastoral professional world, whatever you want to call it, that would seem like a step down to go from the senior pastor, now you're a youth pastor. Typically it's the other way around. Most youth pastors move on to becoming church planners, senior pastors, campus pastors, etc. But he didn't see it that way. To his credit and the humility that he had and understanding that he didn't see it that way. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity. And as he prayed through it, he heard God tell him, take the job. So he did. He took that job. And this youth pastor, this guy, he became the youth pastor of this church, inherited a group of mischievous kids. These boys were terrible, just the worst. They drove away like 5 youth pastors in 2 years because of their behavior. They were just unruly, difficult to manage and lead kids. And when he got there, he tried his best, and he would just created some boundaries and parameters, and he stuck to them. And that group eventually started to embrace him, and that group started to understand and listen to him, because as much as he probably wanted to pull out his own hair at times, as much as he probably wanted to walk away and be like, ugh, these kids are the worst, he never left. He stuck around, earned their respect, and because of that, they learned to trust him. And what's cool is that group of unruly kids was led by about 5 high school boys. And these high school boys, once they saw that his intentions were to lead them towards Jesus, they started to change their behavior. And these high school boys included your pastor, me. I was one of those unruly boys that he took a chance on, that he spent time with. And I learned what dedication and patience meant. And it has helped me develop as a pastor as well too. See, part of restoring hope is remembering who provides for you. My friend Greg remembered who provides for him. That was God. I remembered the moments where God provided for me, and he placed men in my life that helped me take a step towards Jesus. Now, fun fact, and this doesn't really have anything to do with where I'm going, but we know from historical writings that this prophecy that Obadiah says about Edom is fulfilled in 66 AD, hundreds of years later. Whether it's the 840 or the 550 BC, we're talking hundreds of years later. Edom is completely destroyed when they try to revolt against Rome. To this day, you will not meet an Edomite. But the story isn't to encourage us to wait for God's justice. It's not like we should be like, okay, this person wronged me. All right, God, I'm ready. Smite them. That's not what this is. It's not about that. Because let's be honest here. Let's flip the tables. Haven't you and I wronged others as well too? Haven't we said things that we shouldn't have? Have we done things that we shouldn't have that hurt people? And if that's the case, that person deserves the right for God to smite us. We don't want to be smited. I don't know what that word right there. We don't want that part of it. We want others to get theirs, but we don't want to get ours, right? That changes our perspective a little bit. Knowing that, yeah, you know what? People have wronged us and God will resolve things in the end, but it doesn't matter because I am forgiven. I am given a new opportunity and a chance. And there's hope. And that hope is talked about not only in Obadiah, but all the minor and major prophets. He says things like, take a step towards God even when it's hard. That's what he's saying. That's basically the book of Obadiah. These guys have wronged you. Step forward to God. He has a plan and a purpose for you. But what he's doing when he talks about the new Jerusalem that I just read, the new kingdom that he's establishing, he's pointing to Jesus. We all are going to face the same fate as the Edomites. We all deserve to be smoten. But because of Jesus, we won't get what we really deserve. And that is huge. And maybe it's time for some of us to let go of what we think others deserve and go back to the opening point, which is to control only what we can control, ourselves. My question is, what do you need to take a step towards today? What do you need to do to take that step? Where do you need to change? Is there something that God has placed on your heart that you're like, oh man, Lord, I can't let go of this. They've just wronged me so hard. And God's like, I know it's real. It hurts, I know. But guess what? I have something for you, but I can't give it to you yet because you're holding on to this so much that you're going to ruin what I'm going to give to you. And God says, just start to let that go. Just start to slowly release your grip so that your hands will be open and empty. And then I can place this in your hands. And I believe that God has all of that for us. And it may not be something physical that he places in your hands. It might be a peace that he places in our hearts. That once we say, you know what? I can't control what others do. I can control what I do. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to follow you. I'm going to let go of the anxiousness and the anger and the anxiety that comes with holding on to these things. I'm going to come before you with open arms and open hands. And God says, that's all I ever wanted. And then once we do, he says, here's peace. Here's grace. Here's mercy. Here's understanding. Here's compassion. Here's all of these things. And he just pours them out and just saturates us. And he's just waiting for us to do this. What if that's what he's waiting for you to do right now? My encouragement to you right now, as we shut down this video and as we close down this message, I want you to take a minute. Don't do anything else. Just sit. Listen. Ask God to reveal the things that you need to let go. Maybe you already know. Start praying through that. God, help me to take the first step. Help me to just take that first step of letting that go, of working through it, of running towards the problem and not running away, whatever your situation is. But God, give me the grace to do that. Give me the perseverance, the obedience, the patience. The perseverance is the one that I think is the hardest one. It's just to push forward. But God, give me that. I encourage you just to spend some time sitting in that and letting God work through your heart. Let me pray for you and then we'll be done. Heavenly Father, I thank you again for today, for just the opportunity that we have to release the things that hold us back, God, to release the things that keeps us from really feeling the fullness of experiencing you. And so I just pray, whatever we're holding on to so tightly, we begin to release them to the point where we are able to come before you with open hands so that you, God, can place the blessings that you have intended for us right in the center of our hands. And I ask for this, Lord, in Jesus' name, amen. Man, thank you guys for being a part of service today. I hope that today is the first step for you to experiencing what it means to step towards God. I will see you guys next week.